Hello, everyone. For today's encouragement, I want to take you to Matthew chapter 5. According to Jesus, there is great blessing for those of us who learn to become poor in spirit. Jesus begins with what we refer to as the Sermon on the Mount. He begins with 8 blessings. We call them Beatitudes. Each Beatitude begins with the word blessed. Blessed is the one. Blessed is the one. They go on. According to William Hendrickson, Jesus is stating that though everybody may consider his followers to be most wretched and unfortunate, and though they themselves are by no means always filled with optimism regarding their own condition, in the sight of heaven and by the standards of his kingdom, they, the followers of Jesus, are most happy and most blessed. I want to reiterate that the blessing or happiness does not just happen to a person. According to Jesus, it comes about as a result of God's covenant promise. He promises blessing on those who make certain decisions and know certain truths about his kingdom and his purpose. The text for today is Matthew 5 and verse 3. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I need to explain what poor in spirit means, if in fact that's going to be the means by which we are blessed. He's talking about people who have become convinced of their own spiritual poverty. Their pride in themselves and their righteousness is gone. These are people who may or may not have grown up in Christians' homes. They may or may not have learned Bible verses. They may or may not have had perfect attendance. Regardless, they know that standing before God is impossible apart from his grace. They are poor in spirit when it comes to consulting with or marching into the presence of God. People who are poor in spirit know their approach to God is possible only because of God's grace. They make no demands on God. Their heart is broken and contrite. They cannot imagine fighting their way into the presence of God by any means on their own merit. No, they are poor in spirit. In the Gospel of Luke chapter 18, there's an account of a parable of a Pharisee and a tax collector. You remember? You remember how Jesus contrasts the spirit of the two men? The Pharisee stood and prayed about himself. God, I thank you, I'm not like other men, like robbers or evildoers or adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and I give 1/10 of what I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Here we have the description of the contrast of two men. One is proud in spirit, and the other is poor in spirit. The one who was poor in spirit was the one that Jesus commended. He was the man who was on the road to blessing. Despite the many accomplishments of the Apostles Paul, with his education, his family, his heritage, his knowledge of the law, he would still write of himself, what a wretched man I am. Who will rescue me from this body of death? There's a man describing his attitude about his own spirit. He is poor as he stands before a holy and righteous God. In short, the person who is poor in spirit is a person who is spiritually bankrupt. It's the person who is aware of their own sin and knows that they have no reason to think they can approach a holy and righteous God on their own. Fred Smith tells about a couple who took a messed up young girl into their home. She lived with them for a year and then went to all kinds of problems. Every morning after supper, they did something that ultimately made the difference in the girl's life. They had her repeat these words, God does not love me because I am good. He loves me because I am precious. I am precious because Jesus died for me. She repeated these words, clearly words of someone who is poor in spirit. When it dawns on us that God does not love us because we are good, that he loves us because we are precious because he died for us, we will have the poverty of spirit that allows us to be blessed in his kingdom. Repentance is a recognition of our need, and when we sense that we need, we can cast ourselves with reckless abandon at his feet. His grace is there to meet our needs. One of the most familiar hymns that we sing is Amazing Grace, How Sweet the Sound. We sing that even in public places. People love that hymn. The first stanza being, Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. That's a description of someone who is poor in spirit. In a nutshell, that is the poor man who is on his road to blessing.